So this video is going to be a little bit different. This week is a very significant week of my life because 2 years ago, June 10th of 2019, my mom passed away from ovarian cancer. And it was a traumatic experience. It was a horrible experience. A horrible experience of life. And coming up this week will be the 2-year anniversary of her passing. And I wanted to make this video, and this video is all about the impact my mom has made on me and what my mom taught me while she was on this earth and after she left it, and how what she taught me has truly impacted my life, and I hope also will and can impact yours. I also want to make this video because I know when my family was going through this and my mom was sick and my mom passed away, a lot of people reached out to share condolences, and I greatly and will forever appreciate that. But also a lot of people reached out because they were going through something similar or had gone through something similar. So this video is also for people who are going through something like this right now and can pull something positive away from something that seems so negative. And really, it is negative, but you can always find positives in something. So I want to share this and the significance of this week and kind of reminiscing back on the journey and the adventure and the life of my mom, Linda Bear. And what got me thinking about this was this past weekend I was in Pennsylvania, and that's where I grew up. That's where I was raised, central Pennsylvania, this small town right outside of Hershey called Palmyra. And Palmyra is where I went to school. It's where we played sports and we were integrated into the town fully. It was a small town. And I was back home for one of my best friend's weddings. And I was also back home for my grandfather's birthday. So me and my brother went back and we celebrated that with family. And when I was at my grandfather's birthday party, it got me thinking about some of the things that people were saying about my grandpa. And I grew up, looking back in retrospect, I didn't really realize this or know this when I was growing up and when I was younger. But as I got older, in retrospect, looking back, I grew up in a very unique, dynamic family where the Bear side of the family, my dad's side of the family, they were all dairy farmers. And a lot of them are still dairy farmers. Like when we were at my grandfather's birthday party this past weekend, most of the people there still own farms in central Pennsylvania. And a lot of them are very heavily involved in the dairy industry. And through my grandfather and my dad and my uncle and the Bear side of the family, I learned hard work by watching them work. There was no choice. It was you were up at 4 a.m. to milk the cows, and at night after dinner, you were milking the cows again. And my grandfather and the Bear side of the family never had to teach me or tell me what hard work looked like. They just showed me, and I watched and observed this, and I learned from them. And then my mom's side of the family, the Hetricks, a lot of them served in the military. So my grandfather, he served in the Air Force. My uncle served in the Army. My cousin served in the Army. And their influence in watching them develop and grow personally and professionally with military service, that's what really impacted and influenced me to join the Army and go in the Army. So believe it or not, when I was younger, I was torn between the decisions. Do I want to be a farmer? And I was going to be a chicken farmer. Or do I want to join the military? I ended up taking the military route, but I had this very interesting dynamic and influence from these two sides of the family that both taught me the importance of hard work, passion, and ultimately selfless service, these selfless acts. And when I was back home, I was thinking about this and I was realizing this and thinking about this dynamic situation that I grew up in. And my mom just being this rock that taught me so much. My mom was a teacher in the special education school system. She taught life skills, She was the supervisor of special education for our school district and multiple school districts in central Pennsylvania, very heavily involved with the school. My mom also coached with my dad Special Olympics, and they were, again, heavily involved in the Special Olympics program and helping kids with special needs. My mom also was really involved with the church, and every winter, every Christmas, she would gather names of kids and families less fortunate in the school district, and then bring those names back to the church, and we would gather donations of presents and then deliver these presents to these families that were less fortunate on Christmas Day. So my mom taught me all these things of getting involved in the community, being generous, these selfless acts. My mom never had to tell me, do this. This is what you need to do in life. But I learned, again, just like my grandfathers and both sides of my family, I learned this from my mom and my dad. But watching my mom, I learned this and just started instilling these habits into my life. And it was about 2.5 years ago where I was down in Texas, my brother was down in Texas, and my mom was going through this point in her life where she was getting ready to retire. She was still coaching Special Olympics, still very heavily involved with the church, and she was still teaching in the special education system in central Pennsylvania, and she was getting ready to retire. And her plan for after retirement was that her and my dad were going to move down to Texas and start this new chapter of life with me and my brother. And we were really looking forward to that. Like, I was really excited for that, the next chapter of their life, and them being more a part of ours right next door. And my mom started to get fatigued and tired and didn't feel right. Like, my mom, if you were around her, you could feel her energy. She was always the happiest person in the room. She was always the most warm and excited person to see you. And there was really never a dull moment. Like, my mom's energy would, as soon as she walked in the room, you'd feel it. And you would want to, like, literally party with my mom. And about 2.5 years ago, this started to kind of diminish and go away. And we recognized it and she recognized it. So for weeks and months, went through tests to figure out what was going on. And in, I guess it was the winter of 2019, it was like right after the new year, in 2019, my mom was diagnosed with an advanced stage ovarian cancer. And I've talked about this story before on multiple platforms, but when she was diagnosed, I thought because of the powerful woman my mom was, it was one of these things where she would get diagnosed with cancer, she would do chemo, she'd be better, and within a year, she'd be down in Texas living her best life with me, my dad, my brother, and my now wife, Steph. And that's what I thought life looked like for us. And, well, it didn't necessarily turn out that way. So my mom's cancer was super aggressive. She did chemo, which didn't really seem to do anything. She ended up getting surgery where they removed like 95% of the tumors and the masses. And within weeks, it all grew back. It was just so aggressive. It was so aggressive. And I remember getting this call from my dad, and it would have been last week, 2 years ago. Last week, 2 years ago, I remember getting this call from my dad, and I was driving in my truck back to my house. My dad calls, and they were in the ICU because my mom was struggling, but I thought it would all be okay. And my dad called me, and he was choked up, and he couldn't get it out, but he said, they're giving your mom a week to live. And I just felt the biggest lump just form in my throat. And I started just crying, just started breaking down, thinking that my mom was just given 1 week, 7 days to live the rest of her life. And we talk about these moments. It's like you might ask your friends and your family and your peers, like, what would you do if you had 1 year left? What would you do if you had 1 week left? What would you do if you had 1 day left? And I think we kind of romanticize about these moments, but when it's reality, it's scary. So me and my brother took the next flight out back to Pennsylvania. We met up with my dad, who was in the hospital with my mom. And my mom at the time had a breathing tube and a feeding tube down her throat, so she couldn't talk, but she would write things down and speak to us. And after probably 3 days of being in the hospital with my mom, people coming to visit, they took out the breathing tube. And I remember this moment where, like, my dad wasn't there. The doctor came in. He said he was going to do it. He pulled it out. My mom took this big, deep breath, and I heard my mom's voice for the first time in the few days that I was back home. And I remember the next thing that happened where I almost thought my mom was going to... I still had a lot of hope. I still thought my mom was going to make it through this. To me, my mom was and always will be like this superhero. She was just like, she could do anything. Nothing could kill my mom. I thought that she would get through this. Like, there was no doubt in my mind, no matter what anyone said. And after she got the breathing tube taken out, doctors came in and they sent us home on hospice. And there's these things when you go through something like this that you will always remember for the rest of your life. And I remember my mom being told she was going home on hospice. And that was the first moment she realized that people weren't necessarily giving up on her, but preparing for what was inevitable. Preparing for, there's really no way out of this. There's no way. And seeing that realization on my mom's face was just like this pit in my stomach. That was one of the worst moments. One of the worst moments was watching my mom realize that they were sending her home to have her last few days in the comfort of her home with her family. So we ended up going home, and we made my mom comfortable. Friends came and visited, and she was constantly still asking about us. She was asking, how's your dad doing? How are you doing? How are you guys holding up? It's like, Mom, we're all here for you. Stop worrying about us. We're here for you. Just worry about yourself. We want you to worry about yourself. And at that point in my life, me and Steph were engaged, and we were preparing for a wedding that was still a few months out. And we knew that my mom wasn't going to be able to make that wedding. So we held this unofficial ceremony. For my mom, this wedding ceremony, where our pastor from our church came, and Steph and I got married in the house that I grew up in the living room, with my mom watching. And that was a magical moment. That was one of those things that you never forget. Like, I can play that whole thing out in my head. I can play that whole week out in my head, minute by minute, second by second. I remember the smallest things. I remember the biggest things. I remember conversations. I remember things I wrote on notepads, like everything. Remember everything. And we had that ceremony, and my mom looked at me and Steph when we got married, and She said, if you want to see me again, you have to believe in God. If you want to see me again, you have to believe in God. And she said that. That was the first thing she said. And then she said, I'm really going to miss you guys. That was another moment that just like really hit hard. That one hurt. And while my mom was home on hospice, our whole family came into town. My uncle flew up from Texas. My cousin flew in from California. My other cousin flew in from Texas. And we were all just sleeping all over the house, taking shifts, staying up with my mom, helping her with whatever she needed. And she ended up passing away on the morning of June 10th, 2019 in our living room. And all the pain at that point, the suffering was over that she was experiencing, but it was tough. It was the toughest moment of my entire life. And I can't imagine anything being harder than that moment where it's like you don't even know where to go next. You don't know what to do next. It's like, what is the next step, or what do I want? What do I need to? What can I do next? Like you don't really want to do anything else. And I tell that story because I know people are going through something similar at this exact same moment in time. There are a lot of people going through that same exact thing where they're at home with a family member, a loved one, significant other that is going through, it could be cancer, it could be any other disease. They're passing away. Maybe they're in hospice, maybe they're in a hospital, or maybe they just lost someone. They're going through that. And it's tough. It really is really hard. But when I look back, and I was kind of like reminiscing after that moment about the impact my mom had on people. And when we were at my mom's funeral and the people that showed up and the stories that were told, I knew my mom as my mom growing up. I knew the impact she made on me. I knew how involved she was with, like I said, the school district, the church, special education, Special Olympics, people in the local community that just needed help. They just needed help. My mom was there for those people. She felt an obligation and responsibility to help those that were less fortunate, right? And even when she was sick, even when she was at her sickest point, she was still checking on everyone else. She still didn't take the time to soak in her own pain, but reach out to help those that were experiencing pain because of the pain she was experiencing herself. Like the true example, in my opinion, the true definition of like selflessness, that's my mom. That was the way my mom lived. And the things that she taught me that I will forever be grateful for and will never forget and have implemented into my life. Like I said, not because she told me that this is the right thing to do, not because she told me this is how you live a good life, but because she showed me. And my mom showed me that being kind and generous is one of the most important things that you can do in life. My mom was always kind. She was always the nicest person to be around. And she was always the most generous, giving everything she could to other people because she knew she only needed so much. And anything extra was just fluff. It was extra. She was kind. She was generous. I think the biggest thing she taught me was that when you find your true passion and what you believe is your purpose in life, you do everything you can and your God-given ability to truly fulfill it. My mom's passion and purpose on this earth was to help other people. She helped change thousands of lives. Like, no exaggeration, thousands of lives through the school district, through the families impacted, through the kids in the school district, in the church, in the Special Olympics program. She hosted Mini-thon. She was an advisor for Key Club. She was just so involved in our community, and she made it such a big impact. But she taught me that, and she knew, and she realized when she was young that she found her passion, her purpose. And it was her responsibility to truly fulfill that. And she was fulfilled her entire life because she found that early on. I believe, and I'm so grateful and fortunate that I also found my passion and purpose early on in life, and I'm able to fulfill that as well. I take so much away from that. But she taught me that when you find your passion and your purpose, and you're kind and you're generous, fulfill that to your best God-given ability. And the last thing I want to leave off with that she taught me was that, and I really realized this at her funeral, when people were coming up and telling me how my mom impacted and changed the course of their life, like literally changed the course of their life. It's that when you pass away, what you do from the time you're born to the time you pass away, that is your time on earth to make the biggest impact. People are not going to remember you by the house you lived in, the cars you drove, the things you bought, and the things that you owned. No one will remember or talk about you because of those things. But they're going to talk about you because of the impact you made on their life. And my mom did that. She did that on thousands of people's lives. Mine's just one of them. And I'm so proud, fortunate, and grateful that she was and is my mom. So, with that being said, this week is a significant week in my life and will be for the rest of my life. This is the week that 2 years ago, I lost my mom. And that changed the course of my life. It really did. But there's positives to take away of the things that she taught me and taught so many other people as well. And Mom, I love you for that. So I miss you. I love you. And thank you for every single thing that you've done.